All right, to the Liberal leadership race now, and with only a week left for the 4 remaining contenders to convince party voters, a lot was at stake not to make a mistake as they squared off in the only televised debate of the campaign today. Aaron MacArthur has the story.
A week to go before one of these 4 people will be handed the keys to the Premier's office. Today, a last chance for the candidates to sway undecided voters in the Liberal Party. Calling the event a debate, though, might be a bit of a stretch. It was an hour spent largely agreeing on a multitude of topics.
No, I wouldn't do that, Vaughn, because I think one of the things we have to do is be really candid with the public about both the challenges and the opportunities in healthcare.
And the kind of rollback that was posed in the question, though politically tempting, probably isn't realistic.
I wouldn't roll it back either. I think only a small portion of the $16 billion that we expend roughly on healthcare comes from MSP.
Candidates were given an opportunity to ask questions of each other, and right away Kevin Falcon and George Abbott both keyed in on the presumed frontrunner Christy Clark.
So my question to Christy is, are you still committed to capping healthcare expenditures to the rate of economic growth? And if so, where would you begin to find the $700 million that would be necessary to achieve that goal?
I've published the most detailed policy platform of any of the candidates in this race, and you can find it on my website at christyclark.ca, and I appreciate it. We published it today, so George, I appreciate you probably haven't seen it yet. What I say in it is that we want to move the rate of spending in healthcare down toward the rate of economic growth. And what's important about that, because we do need to be worried about how we're able to sustain our healthcare system and support it, we also need to be worried about how we're able to sustain all of the other things that government does.
Christy, I've made a commitment to run in this election, win or lose. Given that the Premier said he would step aside and make that seat available and you could run in it, would you commit to running with us, win or lose, in this leadership race?
Let's be clear about my history with this party. I spent from 1996 to 2001, I traveled this province rebuilding the BC Liberal Party after an election loss with Gordon Campbell. But as I've said many times during this leadership campaign, I'm the only person up here who isn't getting a paycheck from taxpayers every 2 weeks in order to run my leadership campaign. And if I lose on the 27th, I'll be the only one who still isn't getting a paycheck. So I have to think about how I'm going to support my family.
The tepid nature of the debate really speaking to how close this race for leader has become. None of the candidates wanting to alienate any of the 95,000 Liberal Party members. The real debate likely not for another year and a half, when the new Premier has to fight for the job against the NDP.
Okay, so as you saw there, our Legislative Bureau Chief Keith Baldry was one of the panelists at this morning's debate. And Keith, you're back in Victoria, but joining us tonight. First up, any surprises? Did anything catch you off guard or jump out at you today?
Well, as Aaron points out, they were very cautious. I was a little taken aback by the sort of almost blasé attitude to some of the issues we raised them. For example, raising medical service plan premiums, MSP premiums, which hits middle-class voters particularly. 6.6% hike this year, the only tax increase in the budget. Big rate increases at BC Hydro in coming years, upwards of 30 to 50%. But again, just sort of dismissing this as not a concern. So I think the questions in some cases provided them an opportunity to separate themselves from some of the unpopular policies of the government they're members of, or in Christy Clark's case, former members of, but they chose not to do that. Very cautious, not disagreeing with current government policies, and not providing clear answers on some of the other issues we raised, such as what should the Enbridge pipeline in northern BC go ahead? What's their position on that? How do you get around this funding gap for the Evergreen Transit line? How do you tackle child poverty? What do you do with BC ferries? Not really any specifics from them. And as Aaron pointed out in his story, I think it is reflective of the fact that perhaps this is such a tight race. Nobody really knows which way it's going to go. Nobody wanted to stick their neck out very far here. And as a result, you did see a rather tepid affair today.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to stick your neck out now, Keith, and tell us, going into this last week now, where do you think the candidates stand in pecking order, if you're taking your best guess?
Well, I talk to the all 4 candidates' camps constantly, and I get the sense from talking to them all that there seems to be a consensus. Christy Clark is probably in first place now when the vote is announced on Saturday, just after 6 o'clock. And I think Mike DeYoung is probably in 4th spot. George Abbott and Kevin Falcon seem to be in 2nd and 3rd. Not sure who's 2nd, not sure who's 3rd. They're probably a little closer together than they are to the other candidates. The question, therefore, becomes, if Mike DeYoung is in 4th spot, he would drop after the first first count. His second choice, the people who voted for him, their second choices would be redistributed. Be interesting to see whether he has enough votes to actually have an impact on the other three, or whether you have to go to another count. Either Abbott and Falcon would therefore drop and again be redistributed. Would that put Christy Clark into the over the 50% threshold, or would it solidify either Falcon or Abbott's hold on the delegates? So it's a new system of voting for a leader in this province. It's a little complicated. It's not that complicated, but it's tough to prognosticate and figure out where everything's going to go, because the votes are taken ahead of time. It's not like you have a first ballot and then people can decide how they're going to vote for the second choice. No, it's done ahead of time. So I put Christy Clark first, de Jong fourth, and the other two somewhere in the middle.
Pretty much out of time, Keith, but you said it all comes down to who gets the vote out.
Yes, it's like an election in that respect, right. Robin. You've got to get the vote out on Saturday. Whoever does the best there, particularly the front runners, that's the person who's going to win.
All right, Keith Baldry in Victoria for us tonight. Thank you, Keith. We'll chat with you soon. If you'd like to watch the full debate, you can catch it tomorrow night starting at 5 o'clock on Shaw TV. It will air once again at 8:30 Friday night on the eve of the leadership vote.